Welcome to Everything Co-op, bringing you information on how cooperatives can help improve your quality of life. This show is being sponsored by the National Co-op Bank, NCB. The NCB is dedicated to strengthening communities nationwide for the delivery of banking and financial services for the nation's cooperatives, their members, and other socially responsible organizations. For more information on the power of community ownership, visit ncb.coop. That's ncb.coop. Now stay tuned for your host, Vernon Oakes.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Everything Cooperative. You know, this morning is a great morning. We have so much to be thankful for coming out of Thanksgiving, going into the Christmas holidays. And I am so thankful to have Rodney North in the studio with us this morning. Good morning, Rodney.
Good morning, Vernon.
And coming in this morning, I met somebody at the front desk, and I was introduced as the co-op man, but I'm not the co-op man. Rodney is. He's taught me a lot. You've been on the program several times, right?
Yeah, I'm proud to say I was one of your first guests.
Right.
And this is my third appearance.
So that was in December 6 years ago. So this is 6-year anniversary. Okay.
Yeah. Happy anniversary.
Okay. And at that point, you were with
Equal Exchange.
Okay.
Yep. The large worker co-op that cooperates with farmer co-ops and consumer food co-ops and co-op banks and all that good stuff.
So a lot of cooperation among co-ops, the sixth principle.
Yeah, they are a veritable poster child for Principle 6.
And I remember that first Christmas, we had 3 shows related to Equal Exchange.
Yep,
so I got to understand a lot about Equal Exchange.
Yeah, you got to talk to my colleagues, LJ and Beth Ann.
Right. So what are you doing now?
So now I'm an independent co-op consultant, heavily active in something we're probably going to talk about, the DC Cooperative Stakeholders Group, which, of course, you've been participating in as well. Okay,
so what does a co-op consultant do?
We help provide some of the know-how because as come up, often on the show, even last week, people just aren't brought up, exposed to the idea of co-ops. Unless maybe like they're in a farming community or they grow up in a housing co-op. But the vast majority of Americans just aren't exposed to it. It's usually not taught in business schools. It's not often mentioned in your business magazines. It's kind of like not in the air like IPOs, and there's all kinds of other kind of business models and stories that are in our face all the time. Co-ops, not so much. Yet, as you've talked about in the show, they are, in fact, everywhere. They're all around us, multi-billion dollar, many billion dollar sector here in the U.S. So there's co-ops. They need help, or they're helping others to grow, to get started. And there's folks like here in the D.C. area, me, Jim Johnson, and others who help provide some of that know-how, which whether it's around governance or culture issues, because, of course, when you own it, as you do in a co-op, that's a different set of roles, responsibilities than you have in a conventional entity.
So I remember from 6 years ago, talking about those different roles, you were telling me that in the daytime when you were at work, you may be in a business meeting with your boss at the time, who was the president, I think, or chief executive officer, and you would be taking direction from him of what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. But that night, as chairman of the board, when you had that role,
vice chair,
okay, that same person may be in a meeting taking directions from the board members or taking directions from you.
Well, from the board as a group. Yeah,
right.
Because the board collectively would have authority over management, who had authority over the employees, who were mostly worker owners, who would elect the board. So it was a circle.
Yeah.
Everybody was accountable for somebody. Everybody was accountable to someone. But we had different roles. So that kept the lines of authority sort of clean and comprehensible.
Well, I liked it because I never thought about that an employee then could be on the board, that in the daytime, you're taking directions from the management, and at the evenings, the management's taking directions from the board members, which you would be on.
Yeah. So, in fact, there were 3 major hats that one would have, at least 3. So, you're a worker, You have your job to do. It could be in accounting or sales or operations or working in the warehouse. So you're a worker, you're an owner. And so when we got together about 4 to 6 times a year as owners.
Okay.
So, like these days, Equal Exchange has about, I think, 160 employees. Let's say 130, 140 are owners.
Okay.
And so they're going to get together periodically to do owner stuff, make decisions about what are we going to do for profits, who we're going to elect to be on the board, who gets to be members, because they would vote on membership, big picture stuff, the vision. So that's a second hat, your owner hat. And then some, and this was my experience for a while, are also board members who are more involved. So they get elected by their peers. And so, as you were saying, going through this cycle, 9 to 5, you might be a worker, and everybody kind of knows the worker experience. Periodically, you're also an owner, getting together with the others, one person, one share of stock, one vote. So very egalitarian, just very democratic. And then some of those are also board members, playing that more hands-on governance role and also supervising management. And so these are the hats, and it doesn't come naturally to change those hats, and not everybody sort of swiftly, elegantly is taking one half and putting another one on. This gets back to what you were saying, like, well, what does a co-op consultant do? We can help people, the things they need to learn, and that hat game is one of them.
So the hat game is learning. Okay, I got it now. Because as a property manager, which I've been for 26 years, going from a tenant to an owner, there was a major transition in attitude. So this attitude adjustment from going to a worker to an owner, or going from a worker to an owner to a board member, that's major attitudinal changes and a different focus and scope.
Yes. Yeah. Attitude is part of it. Some of it is also, well, what is our scope? And that could be fuzzy, especially given that, like, the owners ultimately are the, quote, sovereign body. They're like the last word, that the buck stops with them. They can decide how big their scope is. And so with some, it's very hands-on. They might get into the nitty-gritty. And others, it could be, they could decide proactively, no, we're going to have kind of a narrow portfolio, and we're going to delegate to the board to do the rest. The board then decides how much they're going to be involved, and then they in turn are delegating to management. So between those three, everybody's going to be responsible for something. Everything should be covered. Nothing should be falling between the cracks.
Great. And this is a worker cooperative, which means that the workers, the employees, own and control the business. That's that sovereignty that you were talking about. Yeah,
and that's where you get that cycle, sort of that circle, where it's kind of, you think about the snake sort of biting on its own tail. Mm-hmm. So in this case, you have these three entities, workers, owners, the board, and management, everybody reporting to somebody else in that circle. And with some thoughtfulness and sort of, candid, productive discussion, you can work out, okay, who's doing what. So you don't, you can avoid unnecessary turf battles or misunderstandings.
Wonderful. So that's what the consultant does.
We can do other things too, to help with more conventional issues like, market research, or, helping to plan a startup, or advising people on, like, how do you raise capital? And, it's going to be different in a co-op structure. You're not going to be giving away control when you accept investors' money. And thankfully, and all of these people have been guests on your show, there are more and more folks and organizations out there providing capital to co-ops of all types, including worker co-ops. And so consultants like myself can help steer people to the most appropriate form of capital for them.
And so when you talk about those people that have this capital, who are those?
Well, like you've probably talked to the folks at Shared Capital Co-op, the Working World. I'm pretty sure you've had Brendan Martin on. Co-op Fund of New England. And now, like around here, WAKIF is helping to provide some of the capital necessary, in this case, for conversions. Conventional businesses who, for a variety of reasons, might be deciding to convert themselves into a worker-owned co-op. They're going to need financing for that transaction. And WAKIF is now helping to provide some of that financing.
So the two that I can think of that have been on the show that you didn't mention, like Share Capital has been on, Working World, the Cooperative Fund of New England. I'm not sure Wakefield if Jennifer has been on the show, but I know them very well.
Well, you can put that on your to-do list.
Okay. And the National Co-op Bank and Capital
Impact Partners. Right.
Are a couple of that have been on the show that provide this funding. Okay. And if for some startup funding, it's CDF. They have some startup monies, particularly for food co-ops and this assisted living kind of co-ops.
Mm-hmm. And there are more out there. And increasingly, you don't even need to go to what's called a CDFI, right? Community Development Financial Institution. People are going to the people. They're doing a variety of whether it's Kickstarter, using platforms like that, or doing stock offerings. And there are people out there like Jenny Kassan, that's Kassan. Jason Weiner out in Boulder, the Sustainable Economy Law Center in California. They're all helping show how social enterprises, including cooperatives, can go raise sort of co-op friendly capital. And this is something that Equal Exchange helped to pioneer, way back, in the 80s, with the help of people like the ICA Group. Mm-hmm. Have you talked to them?
Yes.
So that was something, like I said, going back to the 80s, and now that's beginning to catch on, where either a new co-op or a growing one, or even a veteran, long-established co-op, can go sell non-voting shares to members of the public, and that brings in capital. But because it's non-voting, the worker owners, or whoever the owners of the co-op are, don't need to cede control. That's why it's called co-op friendly capital.
Okay. Because is that the third principle? They have to have autonomy and independence?
I don't know if it's the third, but it's in there. Okay. Yeah, one of the 7 co-op principles.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So those are some of the kinds of things that you're doing as a consultant. I got help startups, help to raise capital, strategic planning, marketing planning, how you work through the different roles that one has to play and help to solve perhaps conflict that comes up and arises.
Well, one I'd like to add, and this is something I've been doing here locally with a great nonprofit. They work all over the DMV, District, Maryland, Virginia area, called the Phillips Program. And I was helping them think through the selection of their model, their business model. And we can talk about that on the other side.
Okay, so we're going to take a break right now. We're talking to Rodney North, who is a co-op consultant in the Washington, D.C. area. And we've just talked about how he worked at Equal Exchange and then came back down to the Washington, D.C. area and has been doing this consulting, helping with startups, raising capital, strategic planning, marketing planning, business planning, and how do you resolve conflict if conflict comes, particularly with the different roles that one plays in a cooperative. So we're going to take a break and we'll come back and talk about I really want to get into this DC Stakeholders Group, and that's one of the things we're going to talk about, all the different co-ops in DC. We'll be right back. Please don't touch that dial. Welcome back, everybody. This is Vernon Oaks. Welcome to Everything Co-op. We're here with Rodney North in studio today. He's been on the show a couple other times, and this is the first time he's been in studio, and just delighted with Radio 1 and Kathy Hughes' studios. They're state-of-the-art, and they're very, 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 very nice.
Yes, I'm very impressed with the facility here. I hope I can come back again sometime.
Yes, we'd love to have you back. So, Rodney, you worked at Equal Exchange. Now you're doing consulting here in the area. And you've talked about this DC Cooperative Stakeholders.
Yeah, DC Cooperative Stakeholders Group.
Okay. How did that get started, and what is that all about?
Well, a lot of credit goes to this friend of ours, Kate Marin, at the DSLBD, Department of Small and Local Business Development. And in fact, this month is the third anniversary of the launch of the DC Co-op Stakeholders Group. So going back to, I guess it'd be 2015 or 2016, people, and I don't know who exactly, were aware that co-ops showed up in sort of like the master plan for the city government. And so somebody had the idea that around different issues, it could be either cooperatives or meeting the needs of returning citizens, that these affinity groups ought to be convened to see if there's something that these groups could do together. And so I guess maybe DSLB took the initiative or Kate was pushing for it. But what came out of it was DSLBD, or also say Kate, set the table and put out a call. In this case, hey, anybody who's interested in co-ops, we're going to get together once a month, and we guarantee we're going to do this for at least 6 months, even if nobody shows up for the first 5. We're going to do it for 6 months and just see what happens. Mm-hmm. And so, I call that sort of setting the table and ringing the bell. And so DSLB did that, and a bunch of us showed up. You showed up, and we got people from local co-ops or people who sort of support cooperatives, the National Co-op Business Association, National Co-op Bank, Capital Impact Partners, people from city government, lawyers who are interested in co-op legal issues, academics who had been studying this and who had a lot to share, people from sort of nascent worker cooperatives. There were all kinds of points of entry, points of interest. And so we very quickly realized, yes, we don't know exactly what we can do together, but just getting together seemed like a good idea. And to me, it's not surprising that a lot of good stuff came out of that, just people meeting each other. So even if the group didn't do X, Y, or Z, there was, X coming out of the group, because of these chance meetings and people getting to know each other. It's like, I need this. Oh, I have this. And they can go off and advance that. Mm-hmm. But we did a poll amongst ourselves trying to figure out, okay, what are the issues we care most about? Like, what are the things we'd most like to do? And there was a clear sort of a critical mass of interest around anything to do with food. So that might take the form of consumer-owned food co-ops or small food producers getting together in some sort of cooperative structure. It could be urban farmers getting together. So anything to do with food, and also a great interest around worker co-ops, either supporting existing ones, promoting the idea, helping new worker co-ops come into existence. So over the last 3 years, those have sort of been consistent areas of interest. And I'd say a third, when you look back and say, okay, what are some of the common activities or recurring activities over those 3 years would be events and education. You remember we did an event in Anacostia at the Anacostia Arts Center, or in the Hive, which is below the Arts Center, giving a talk about how co-ops strengthen neighborhoods. We've done these events on the mall, where, thanks to NCBA, there have been the co-op festival, right? Many co-ops from around the country really set up booths and sort of preach the co-op message. So our little stakeholder group, we've had booths there telling people, we exist. Co-ops exist in the city. These are things that we're trying to do, trying to encourage people to, first make sure they even know we exist, and then encouraging them to join us and participate.
We know that we exist, that co-ops exist. But even before that, because you mentioned this earlier, just know what co-ops are.
Yeah. Okay. So, and there's not, that is something we've consistently been doing. Oh, so for example, so we meet monthly. Next meeting is December 11th at 6 p.m., location to be determined.
Well, because we don't know the location, and that's 6 days from today.
Right. But we can tell people about our website.
That's what I wanted to know.
Yeah. So it's very simple, dcstakeholders.coop. And you can go there, you can sign up so you get regular alerts, including messages about upcoming meetings, where it's going to be. The meetings aren't always in the same place. So dcstakeholders.coop. And often before the formal meeting starts at 6, somebody like myself will do a Co-op 101. So starting at 5, and it's just whoever's interested, maybe they don't want to come for the full meeting, but they have co-op questions, or they want to know more about what is a co-op, what forms does it take, or they're in a co-op and they want to ask you, kind of want some free coaching about some issue. So we can help provide that. So we've done organized activities like the DC Co-op Day that we did late October. Maybe we can talk about that more later. And then just these sort of small monthly meetings where people can learn more, they can connect with others who are interested. Through these meetings, I learned of a couple whose names I won't share right now, who wanted to loan a substantial amount of money to a local co-op, but they didn't know the local co-ops. And through attending the stakeholder co-op meetings and then meeting me and we could talk further, they were able to find a local co-op to whom they extended a very meaningful loan. So that's kind of the sort of serendipity that can come from simply getting together regularly and talking.
Without talking about the name of the person, some idea of how much money? Was that $50,000, $500,000? What?
$100,000.
Wow. Okay, so the co-op stakeholders group meets once a month. The next meeting is
the 11th,
which is next Wednesday evening. It starts 5 o'clock for Co-op 101, which is basically what's the basics of co-ops. What are they?
Yeah, you don't need to be a co-op expert. In fact, it's like for everybody but co-op experts. So they shouldn't be intimidated.
So anybody that just have a question about it, want to know something about what we're talking about here in this show, you can come and Rodney or somebody will give you the basics of co-ops. And if you're in a co-op, which I get a lot, I mean, it's housing co-ops or some other co-op, then you can just come in and ask your question. And if the person there doesn't know, they'll know somebody they can contact to get that information.
That happens all the time, where referrals,
Okay.
It may not be that the exact person you need is at that meeting that night, but somebody probably knows somebody
Right.
who can help you along. Like just last night, I went to one of the Food Policy Council meetings, and I heard about something that was going on. It's like, oh, they really need to talk to Capital Impact Partners about this new food-related fund that's getting started. And that's just the kind of thing that happens at our monthly stakeholder meetings.
Okay, so you just put a lot in there. What was this meeting last night?
So last night I went to the monthly DC Food Policy Council meeting.
Food Policy Council meeting.
Yeah. And so this is not related to co-ops per se. That there was some co-op, stuff discussed. That's why I was there. And one of the speakers was talking about a new, so I think it's called Good Food Investment Fund. There's a sort of a co-op angle to it. And so I made a point after the meeting to go to him and say, oh, you need to talk to Capital Impact Partners. We mentioned them earlier. They do a lot of lending to cooperatives.
And this year, well, I think starting last year, they made DC as one of their main focus points that they want to do. And they've done a lot in Detroit.
Yeah.
So they're making DC their focus point. So,
yeah.
okay.
So I was just using that as an example of the kind of thing that happens at our monthly meetings where you get a step closer to the resource you need. The entity or the person you need might be at the monthly meeting, or, somebody knows somebody, right? Mm-hmm. And so they pass on a name, they pass on a website. And some good stuff has happened just because of this 3-year habit now of getting together monthly of people who care about co-ops. So that's why I want to encourage, local folk out there to come to our meetings. You don't know what you might get out of it, or you don't know what you might contribute. Like you may think like, I don't need anything co-op wise. Maybe you have something to offer.
Mm-hmm. And the meetings are normally, we said it's the 11th at 5 o'clock, and for the general meeting about...
The general meeting starts at 6.
The general meeting starts at 6.
And the co-op one session starts at 5 o'clock.
Okay.
Now people are free to hang around and participate in the general meeting at 6, but they don't feel like they have to.
You're normally at a library or a church, and you'll let us know.
Yeah, some common space. We try to make it near metro stations.
We'll be right back. We're going to take our second break here, and please don't touch the dial. We'll be right back. everybody. This is Rodney North. The program is Everything Cooperative. We talk about the co-ops, their values, why they're beneficial, what happens in communities, how you get them started. And so with all of the things that we normally talk about, we're so delighted to have Rodney North in the studio with us this morning because he has been active in co-ops now for a couple decades. Probably started when he was 5. Okay, so Rodney, we're talking about DC Stakeholders, Co-op Stakeholders Group. We talked about how it got started. We send you meet once a month, or we meet once a month, normally at a church or a library close to a metro. Next meeting's on the 11th, next Wednesday. And you can go to the webpage, www.dcstakeholders.
It's actually not www. It's just DC Stakeholders Group. Sorry, dcstakeholders.coop.
Okay, dcstakeholders.coop. And you can find out where it's going to be if you want to get information about it.
I want to give a specific shout out to a new function that our mutual friend Justin Frank has put on the website, which is that people can sign up to the website, and then they can add to our ecosystem map. We want to create a map of all the co-ops in the area. And we've just gotten started, so there's maybe 7 or 8 that are currently listed. But it'd be great for listeners out there who are involved in any kind of co-op, your credit union, your housing co-op, your Ace hardware store, what have you, to sign on to the website, and then you can add, it's called add a listing. You see the red button in the upper right-hand corner. And so it'd be great to have a comprehensive list of all the co-ops in the area. We, as you and I were saying before the show, there could be as many as 400 just in the district proper, because we have about 250 housing co-ops, I think over 75 credit unions. I don't know if that's separate credit unions or branches. And then you got, all the other kinds of co-ops, daycare, art galleries, worker co-ops, purchasing co-ops, people like the Community Purchasing Alliance. You got some worker cooperatives. So it'd be great for people to go ahead and go up there and add their co-op to the map.
So you can go to dcstakeholders.coop, and you in the top right-hand corner is something called Add Listing. And so you can put in your type of co-op and then the co-op location and so forth.
Yeah.
So just real quickly, for those of you that may be new, there's 4 basic types of co-ops. And it depends on who owns and controls the business. If the business is owned and controlled by the employees, it's called a worker co-op. And we've already talked about equal exchange, the different co-ops. Glut in this area is a food co-op that's owned by the workers. It's a worker co-op. And then if it's owned and controlled by the people that uses the products or services, it's called a consumer co-op. And Rodney's already talked about housing co-ops as a consumer co-op. That business is owned by the people that live in it, or credit union is a consumer cooperative. So
REI is a consumer co-op.
REI.
And they're on our map.
Oh, great. Because they have a new flagship store here in the district. So there's different kind of consumer co-ops. Then on both sides of farming, the farmers got together and understood this world of co-ops. And so they created a business to buy things from. So groups of farmers would come together and say, we want to buy our seed, our fertilizer, whatever we might need, tractors, equipment.
Inputs.
Okay, whatever inputs into the farm. Great, thank you. I like learning. So all of these inputs, they said, we want to create this purchasing co-op. That's what it's called, a purchasing co-op, so that these people can get the skill sets to know all of the different vendors and know all of these different products and be able to get better product with a lower price a lot of the times. So this purchasing co-ops now is beginning to work more. Like we have one in the district called CPA, Community Purchasing Alliance, that was mainly set up to work with charter schools and churches, nonprofits, government entities, to buy the kinds of things that these organizations needed. Again, lower price, better quality. And then on the other side of farming, outputs, I got it. So outputs are called marketing co-ops or producer co-ops. And so that the farmers then would sell their products to this business that they own. So they create this business, and of course this business, then the people in this business could learn different markets that the farmer could not get to, and they could add value, and that's why the producer part comes to it. And you get Cabot Creamery,
Ocean Spray, Organic Valley.
Okay, so you get all of these businesses that we know, but we didn't know that they were co-ops.
Yeah, Blue Diamond.
Yeah.
Welch's.
I do a lot of Blue Diamond nuts.
Some made raisins.
And raisins. Okay.
Yeah.
So all of these different co-ops are, in this case, they're producer or marketing co-ops. So those are the four basic types. Now, artists are beginning to use this also. They're coming together, and there's Ujamaa in Pittsburgh, a group of black women artists. Some do carvings, wood carvings, some do jewelry, some make clothes, and then they would buy from other people of color to sell. So they have a storefront in Pittsburgh that any individual artist could not afford to do. But by coming together and pooling their resources and their time and talents, then they can run this store and sell their products.
In that same spirit, we have four here in DC. The Foundry Gallery, Gallery A, Studio Gallery, and the Washington Printmakers Gallery.
Okay. Fantastic. So Pittsburgh, D.C., and other organizations are beginning to do that. Okay. And so in D.C., we said about 75 credit unions, which is a consumer co-op. We have 250 or so housing co-ops, which is a consumer co-op. And that's broken down into market rate co-ops and what we call limited equity co-ops. That's limited equity is more for affordable housing. That the TOPA law, the Tenant Opportunity to Purchases law. Marion Barry was really big on co-ops.
Huge. And I think that's sort of an undersold part of his legacy was, how enthusiastic he was about the cooperative model and all that he did to make it possible. I imagine that a lot of our current housing co-ops, especially the low equity ones, either were started or supported by his efforts.
Oh, all the TOPA laws was all his efforts. So yeah, it was pretty much 100% of these limited equity co-ops that started in the 80s, some in the late 70s, but mainly 80s, 90s, were his efforts and his laws that he put in. No, he's very undersold in what he was able to accomplish in co-ops. In the Federation of Southern Co-ops, started in 1967, that the 13 states, southern states, mainly farmers, they were incorporated in D.C. because the laws in D.C. was favorable to co-ops.
Yeah, and to this day, many of the southern states still don't have a sort of a conducive, legal environment for co-ops. Mm-hmm. So it's a struggle that continues.
Okay, so what are some of the other types? You said daycares.
Yeah, when you think about it, right, co-ops often come into a place where something could be done, but it isn't being done because the market isn't filling that need. The market provides lots of stuff, but if there's not money to be made, some sort of activity like providing affordable daycare doesn't happen. Providing affordable housing doesn't happen on its own. So people get together using the co-op model, and daycare is one example.
Providing electricity in farming communities and rural communities wasn't happening in the 30s and the 40s, and that's why Roosevelt started with providing monies to help rural electric co-ops get started.
Yeah, and so still about 70% of the land area.
75 to 80, I've heard.
Okay.
Okay.
I guess it depends on whether you count Alaska.
Okay.
So yeah, to this day, call it 3/4 of our land area is serviced by consumer-owned rural electric co-ops.
So
because the market wasn't interested in meeting that need.
Well, this is one of the problems with capitalism. If you cannot get a return on investment, then you don't invest.
Wait, I'll push back a little bit because as we saw at Equal Exchange, I talked about how we were able to raise equity. Mm-hmm. We'd sell shares without a vote, and we paid our investors a good rate. In fact, over many blocks of 10 or 15 years, they were beating the S&P stock market. We were paying about an average of a 5% return. So, their $1,000 became $1,050, and then it would go up another 5%, another 5%. So they were doing fine, and they were supporting a great thing, this worker-owned organic food company.
Okay. So I want to debate with you a minute.
Okay.
Because I totally get what you're saying. So if I or somebody that got some extra money says, do I invest in a stock market? Do I invest in equal exchange or some other worker cooperative? That worker cooperative may give you a better return on average. I got that. And that's not what I'm talking about, though. What I'm talking about with capitalists, I'm talking about when you look at an area in the 30s, you're in the 30s and the 40s, and you say, am I going to put string wire in through Kansas? Okay, and I can only, there's I don't know, 100 miles between houses, and I got to put up all of this line and these poles in order to reach these people. And you look and say, well, what's my return on investment? Well, it's negative because of what I've got to cost to put it in. So I'm not going to do that.
Sure.
So that's the one I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Not investing in a worker-owned cooperative. That could be a great investment. Yeah. But looking at the marketplace and saying, no, I'm not going to put money in that particular market. So this is one of the places that I have found that co-ops come in is when the market won't do the investment.
Yeah. Well, I was trying to get across is that sometimes there is a positive ROI, return on investment, and the market still won't do it. Oh. You know, so it's like maybe your investor could get 4 or 5%, but somewhere else they can make 6, 7, or 8. And so they do that other thing, like when it comes to housing, it's like, well, I could build luxury condos and make, let's say, 8%, or I can make affordable housing and I make 4%. So it's not that it's not profitable to provide that affordable housing. It's just more profitable to do something else.
Yeah.
And the money follows the money, right? The capital goes to where the money can be made, the most money. And then there's times where there's like as you were saying, trying to string wire through empty parts of Kansas where, there's not money to be made, but there is a need to be met. And people get together to meet their own needs, even if the, investor-owned businesses don't want to do it.
And this is where the co-op model really comes into play.
Well, in both places, where there's no money to be made or where there's like some, but it's not enough to attract capital.
Right. Got it. Okay, so you were talking about the different types of co-ops, and we talked about daycare centers because that could be a place where there's not as much money to be made, and there's a huge need.
I know, and we have this crazy situation here where, people will readily tell you there's not enough daycare, not enough affordable quality daycare. So parents are struggling. Businesses struggle because their employees can't get the daycare they need. And yet, the people who are working in daycare, the employees are often making very little, so they're having a hard time. Like the market is broken, or as economists would say, there's market failure. And the co-op model is one way, it's like another tool in the toolkit to try to solve that problem, meet that need.
How?
Well, you could have the parents owning the business. It could be the employees who actually are working at the daycare. They could be the owners. And one of their struggles is getting capital, right? Because they can't scrape together the money to pay these really high rents that we have in DC to get a location like where it needs to be, ideally near the offices where all the workers are. But and I'm blanking right now on the names, but there are people here who are trying to use the co-op model to meet the daycare need. Wonderful.
I know there's a daycare co-op in Greenbelt. There's one in Southeast, but it's in a school. And I visited them, and I've tried to get them on the show, but they tell me, particularly in Greenbelt, they say they're too busy. They don't have time to take an hour off to be on the show.
We don't want them to take their eye off the kids. So that's good.
But this is a model for you all that have a daycare, that are looking for a daycare center. And by being a property manager, I have a site in mind that could probably be a 10, 20 student daycare center that might be inexpensive rent. We're going to take our final break, and we'll be right back. Coming back with Rodney to talk more about the DC Stakeholders Group. We'll be right back. Information is power, and that's the reason that WL is a great partner for us. The National Co-op Bank is sponsoring this program to give you information. The fifth principle of cooperation is training information. So giving you information so you'll know about the co-op model, so you can search and look for co-ops to purchase goods and services from, to help those particular owners, or you can look to get information from people like Rodney or the DC Stakeholders Group to start your own cooperative. A lot of times co-ops are formed to solve some community problem, whether that's not having electricity in the 30s and 40s or not having good quality daycare centers in today's market. So it's solves problems, affordable housing, no matter what. So it's also a great model if baby boomers who own businesses, and they say there's a silver tsunami coming, that all of these baby boomers own these small businesses that will either be bought by a larger company. It could be, I think 12 or 13% of them have a succession plan, or they'll be bought by big businesses and moved or closed, or they'll close down because they're not going to be sold. And then that community and those employees lose their jobs. So we're looking for conversions, and this is what Wycliffe is doing, to looking for helping these owners end up with a win-win. Instead of closing your business, you can sell it to the employees. Employees can keep their jobs, and the community can keep money circulating in that community. So what else is happening, Rodney, with what we can look for in the future with DC stakeholders?
Well, one of our more active sort of supporters, participants, have been the folks from WACIF, the Washington Area Community Investment Fund. That's WACIF.org. And one of the cool things that they got going on is the DC Employee Ownership Initiative. And as you were saying, that's looking at the silver tsunami. So as they've pointed out, 40% of DC area African-American business owners are nearing retirement. And a lot of them don't have a plan for selling it or for passing it on in some fashion. And so we don't want to see those businesses shut down. Something that's underappreciated is that they could viably, profitably sell their business to their employees. There's two basic ways they might do that. One is called an ESOP, Employee Stock Ownership Plan. Not always are viable for the smaller business, say that has 20, 30 employees. And a lot of business owners have smaller businesses. So for them, it's the worker co-op model might be more appropriate. And so WACIF is facilitating these kinds of conversions. And it's led by our friend Jennifer Bryant. So they've formalized a conversion process. They've set up a conversion technical assistance process, and they've completed the first step with at least 4 real businesses. So they're beginning to fill their pipeline. But if you have a small business and you're looking, for like what happens down the line because you're nearing retirement, you got to check them out. So that's WACIF. So getting back to Kate, so I like to think of her as like the midwife of the Co-op Stakeholder Group, Kate Marin at DSLBD. She is involved with something called the DC Collective Equity Initiative, Building Wealth Through Food. And to put it as concisely as possible, I remember I mentioned at the beginning of the show about how food was this common issue a lot of people cared about when it came to like what could co-ops do in the area.
Well, I like to eat. Yeah.
Well, we love co-ops, and we all like to eat at least once a day. And so the collective equity initiative is trying to address food issues, often with the application of the co-op model. So that could be through support for consumer-owned food stores and food deserts. It could be like urban gardeners, farmers getting together and, as you were saying, selling their crops together, because often it's not viable. They don't have the economies of scale doing it one by one, but they might do it together. I can tell you an example from Rhode Island where that worked. Or it could be the workers at some sort of food-related business. It could be a catering business. It could be a small restaurant. They could be making, small batches of jam or pickles or whatever, they could be doing it on a cooperative model. So if any of that sounds relevant to you, you should Google the DC Collective Equity Initiative, or contact Vernon at the show.
Or Kate.
That could be a start.
Okay.
And then,
well, I got one question on Wake with these real businesses. Have they reached out? It seems like they should be able to have a list of the small businesses, either all of them in D.C., and reach out to them to tell them about this conversion piece. Do you know if they've done that, Mark?
Yeah, I know they've done a lot of conversion. They've partnered with people who know people. So, WakeIF has been around quite a while, I think.
Yeah.
Is it 25 plus years?
Sometime, yeah.
Yeah. So, they know the landscape. They know sort of the small business community that they're serving. But, they could, any of these organizations that's doing good, you can use a hand from folks like your radio show to get the word out that, hey, think ahead. If you're a small business owner, do you have a plan for when you retire? And have you thought about selling to your employees? And if you haven't, they can walk you through it, see, is that actually a viable option for you? And then, okay, they can help you do it.
So that is a win-win-win-win. It's win
Just
for
everybody.
For the owner, because he may get money where he just have to close it down otherwise. It's a win for the employees because they keep their jobs and
become owners.
They'll become owners, and they'll learn about running a business. They have to learn this transition from a worker to an owner. It's a win for the community because that money stays in the community, and that's one of the things about a co-op. That money turns over in the community 5, 6, 7, 8 times, so it really helps the growth of that community.
And it's helpful, at least in one other way to the community, which is that if you know what it's like, you're in a sort of business district, and if you have boarded up shops, that's bad for everybody.
Yeah.
You don't want the business next to you to be boarded up. You want it to be full. You want people coming and going, business to be happening. So even if you're not selling, you don't want your neighbor's business to be shut down. And then also, it's very good for the city because it helps support the tax base.
It's 5 wins. Okay. Totally winning situation. Okay. So what else are you doing, Rodney?
So one of you remember I said how one of the benefits of the stakeholder group is just people getting together. Mm-hmm. And so I met a gentleman there, Jim Schulman, who's the founder of what's called the Alliance for Regional Cooperation website, arcdmv.org. And so I'm a collaborator with Jim, and something that Jim this is in the early stages, but it's the working title is the Cooperative Alliance. And the idea is to create an opportunity for the co-ops of the area to cooperate, to do stuff together. It could be joint purchasing. It could be cross marketing. So reaching out to each other, making it easier for, say, the members of a credit union to find their local Ace Hardware store or housing co-ops, or a food co-op. That often the members of these different co-ops are unaware of each other. The members of the housing co-op don't understand that the credit union down the street is also a cooperative business. Members of small businesses together in the co-op model, like Flooring America. These are small businesses that are organized as like a national chain, a national co-op of flooring stores. They don't know that REI is a co-op. So getting back to the Alliance for Regional Cooperation, Jim is working on creating a method and sort of an incentive for co-ops to get together, to share, to get more on each other's radar, to introduce their members to each other. Because all the co-ops would win by doing that. And then lastly, something we're doing to stakeholder group is there are people who would like to create a youth co-op summit. This is like the co-op day that we did back in late October, which is for the general public. People want to learn more about co-ops, how they could relate to their lives, the difference that it can make. But in this case, the suggestion is that we ought to put on a co-op day, but focused on young people, say
I like that a lot.
Say ages 13 to 21. So this is just information, but if people like that idea, they should come out to our stakeholder meeting, either this one or the next one in January and so on, and take part. Because really, our stakeholder group is whoever shows up that day. So people ought to get on board.
I like that a lot because I just learned about in Puerto Rico, they have in the school systems, they have youth co-ops, worker-owned youth co-ops, about 53 co-ops that's run by kids. And this goes all the way down to maybe 8 years old. So it's quite interesting, the different kinds of co-ops they have. Yeah. And to learn how to run a business, all kinds of good benefits. Rodney, thank you very much, sir. Any last 30 seconds, any comment? I
encourage listeners to go check out your library of past shows because there's so many good ones.
Go to everything.coop to get the last shows. I think we have almost 200 on there now.
Yeah. So it's a real treasure.
Everybody out there, thank you very much for checking in. We'll see you next Thursday, and please live cooperatively.